Summit strategy. President Trump and Kim Jong-un are on the ground in Singapore ahead of their historic meeting. Cold in Quebec. We recap the G7 meetings, including tough words between the United States and Canada. Purge in Chile. The Holy Father accepts the resignation of a bishop at the center of a sex abuse scandal in the majority Catholic country. And a new Triple Crown winner. Justify defies all the odds in Saturday's Belmont Stakes, and the jockey thanks God for the victory. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, June 11th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby. Lauren Ashburn is on assignment. We're hours away from a groundbreaking moment. For the first time in history, a sitting U.S. president will meet with the leader of North Korea. President Trump and Kim Jong-un arrived in Singapore over the weekend for their summit, and they'll soon meet face-to-face. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump and Kim Jong-un will greet one another tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 9 a.m. Tuesday morning in Singapore. Pope Francis and Christians around the world are praying their meeting leads to peace. The night before the summit, North Korea's reclusive leader leaving his hotel for sightseeing in Singapore and taking time for a selfie. Both leaders portraying a relaxed tone ahead of their historic meeting. President Trump celebrating his birthday a few days early with a cake. Over the weekend, he said he'll know very quickly if their meeting will be a success.
I think within the first minute, I'll know. My touch, my feel, that's what I do.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who has met twice with Kim Jong-un, says North Korea is willing to denuclearize.
The fact that our two leaders are sitting down face to face is a sign of the enormous potential to accomplish something that will immensely benefit both of our peoples and the entire world.
Un futuro de pace per la penisola coreana.
On Sunday, Pope Francis prayed the summit will contribute to the development of a positive path that will assure a future of peace for the Korean Peninsula and the entire world. Open Doors USA is calling for prayer and fasting before the summit. The organization serves persecuted Christians around the world and hopes the summit will lead to a new era of religious freedom in North Korea. Kim Jong-un spent 2017 test-firing rockets, some having the potential to reach the U.S. mainland. President Trump responded by threatening fire and fury. The world now waits to see if the two leaders can advance peace.
So it's a one-time shot. And I think it's going to work out very well.
President Trump plans to leave Singapore earlier than first scheduled. That could indicate progress has been made before the actual meeting. A statement from the White House today says discussions between U.S. and North Korean officials have moved more quickly than expected. Wyatt?
Mark, what can you tell us about the format of this summit?
To start, we know President Trump and Kim Jong-un are scheduled to meet one-on-one with only translators present. Then a larger meeting will take place with more U.S. and North Korean officials. The U.S. Secretary of State says this summit could be the start of more talks in the future. Wyatt.
And we'll be closely watching this. White House correspondent Mark Irons. Thanks, Mark. President Trump is taking aim once again at Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It comes after the president reversed his support of the G7 group's statement, an agreement highlighting jobs, the environment, and most notably, trade. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi joins us with more. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. President Trump is slamming Canada for imposing what he calls massive tariffs on U.S. products, and he made it clear after the G7 summit in Quebec. But GOP Senator John McCain and some Democrats are critical of the president for alienating American allies.
It's embarrassing that America would distance ourselves from traditional allies.
Democratic lawmakers blast the president for pulling out of the G7 closing agreement.
Not to sign a statement of solidarity, which stands for everything that we stand for, is a big mistake. I understand the president was upset. The president could have said that, but to walk away from our allies in this way, I think is a mistake.
President Trump took back his support for that statement after Canada's Prime Minister said this.
It would be with regret, but it would be with absolute certainty and firmness that we move forward with retaliatory measures on July 1st, applying equivalent tariffs to the ones that the Americans have unjustly applied to us.
The author of The Art of the Deal went into the summit confident he could work his magic on trade.
When it all straightens out, we'll all be in love again.
As Catholics, we want just trading.
Catholic University professor Jay Richards doesn't agree with the president's proposed tariffs, but he says President Trump is right about something.
So we have a 2.5% tariff on European automobiles. They have a 10% tariff against ours. And so President Trump has something to complain about. The question is really whether tariffs in general are a good idea and whether that makes sense for the American economy.
Do they?
Tariffs in general are a terrible idea. Whenever you hear tariff, you should just think tax on me.
President Trump is sticking with his plan for tariffs on steel and aluminum imports, but a bipartisan group of 14 senators are sponsoring a bill to require congressional approval. And the EU is threatening to retaliate next month with new tariffs on U.S. products like bourbon, peanut butter, and even orange juice. Wyatt?
Correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Pope Francis has accepted the resignation of the bishop at the center of Chile's clergy sex abuse scandal. Up until now, Bishop Juan Barros ran the Diocese of Osorno. Pope Francis appointed the 61-year-old in 2015, despite the objections of the local faithful, his own sex abuse prevention advisors, and some of Chile's other bishops. The Holy Father also accepted the resignations of 2 other bishops who are over the retirement age of 75. With more on this, we go to Vatican correspondent Juliet Lindley, who joins us now from Rome. Juliet, tell us about the controversy surrounding Juan Barros and why he's stepping down.
Wyatt, critics of Barros questioned his leadership because victims in his diocese accused him of witnessing and ignoring their abuse at the hands of Chile's most notorious predator priest, Fernando Karadima. Now, Barros denied the charge, but he joined 30 of Chile's other active bishops in offering their resignations to the Pope in an extraordinary summit at the Vatican last month. Now, Pope Francis had summoned Chile's bishops to Rome after admitting he made grave errors in judgment about Barros. Now, the Holy Father had defended him strongly, as you will remember, Wyatt, during his visit to Chile in January of this year.
So how are abuse survivors in Chile reacting to the news of the resignation?
Well, an abuse survivor who denounced Barros for years and who pressed the Vatican to take action is praising his removal. Juan Carlos Cruz says in a tweet, "Today begins a new day for the church in Chile and hopefully the world." But he and other Catholics in Osorno are warning that more resignations and action must follow to heal the devastation caused by the scandal. Cruz met with Pope Francis in April and provided his input, and after that meeting and a report compiled by 2 leading Vatican investigators about the depth of Chile's scandal, Francis realized he had misjudged the situation.
Let's look ahead a little bit more, Juliet. What do you think is next for the church in Chile?
Well, temporary leaders have been named for each of the dioceses impacted, and 2 Vatican investigators are heading back to Chile tomorrow to begin what the Vatican has said is a healing mission to Osorno. Their investigation is ongoing, and Pope Francis has promised Chilean Catholics that never again will the church ignore them. As yet, it's unclear whether the Holy Father will accept the resignations from the other bishops, Wyatt. That remains to be seen.
And we'll continue to follow to see what happens as a result of that. Juliet Lindley, EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Wyatt.
Several German bishops are surprised at the Vatican's rejection of a proposal to allow Protestants married to Catholics to receive the Eucharist in certain circumstances. One prominent cardinal says he's furious. In a May letter, the Vatican's doctrine chief shot down the proposal because of a series of problems with it. Our news partners have a lot more on the reaction. Just head over to CatholicNewsAgency.com to read more. Spain offers to take in rescue ship carrying more than 600 migrants after Italy and Malta refused them in. The diplomatic standoff left the migrants stranded at sea for 2 days and revealed the tough tactics of Italy's new government. The migrants were rescued from flimsy smuggler boats in the Mediterranean by Italian maritime ships. Roughly 1/4 are from the Sudan. At least 12 people are dead after a suicide bomber strikes a government building in Afghanistan. It comes days before the start of a holiday ceasefire with the Taliban. Police say the attack happened as people were leaving work for the day. No group immediately claimed responsibility, but the Taliban and Islamic State regularly target government buildings. Thousands of Brits mark 100 years since the first women won the right to vote in the UK. This Sunday, marchers in London wore green, white, and violet, the colors of the suffragette movement. Organizers asked 100 artists to work with women's groups to design banners inspired by the bold designers of the original campaign to secure women's voting rights. Coming up, a Catholic doctor examines why the suicide rate has risen by nearly 30% since 1999. And new developments in the court case involving the venerable Fulton Sheen. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. The results of a lengthy probe into the handling of sexual abuse claims by the Catholic Church in Pennsylvania could be made public within weeks. A statewide grand jury spent nearly 2 years looking into the abuse scandal. Advocates for victims say the findings will be the biggest and most exhaustive ever by a U.S. state. A Vatican court has indicted a diplomat from the Vatican Embassy in Washington on charges of possessing child pornography. Monsignor Carlo Capella will face a trial starting June 22nd. Capella was number 4 official at the Washington Embassy. He's been the subject of multiple investigations in the U.S. and Canada. He's been in Vatican custody since April. Suicide prevention is in the spotlight after the recent deaths of celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain and designer Kate Spade. Since their deaths last week, calls to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline increased 25%. The national hotline is a network of crisis centers that provide over-the-phone counseling to individuals who might be contemplating suicide. Joining me now is Dr. Grazie Christie, policy advisor with the Catholic Association. Grazie, welcome back to the program. According to a new government report, the suicide rate in the United States has risen by nearly 30% since 1999. There are various factors, the opioid epidemic, depression, among others, but you say we shouldn't ignore the effects of legalizing physician-assisted suicide, now legal in 7 states and the District of Columbia. What's the impact here?
So I think we have to be very careful to draw that connection, draw that line between the legalization of suicide for a certain subset of patients, for the terminally ill in so many jurisdictions, and this terrible increase in suicide rates. When we legalize something, what we're doing is we're normalizing it. We're saying that it's good in certain cases to take your own life.
You also say studies show moral objections to suicide based on religious principles reduce the probability of acting on suicidal thoughts. What's the link here?
So when there are moral, religious, or philosophical objections to suicide, people are protected from acting on those suicidal thoughts. They believe that it's wrong to do so, so then they take that pause, they take that moment to think about it again and not go through with it. So one thing that the physician-assisted suicide lobby, which is so powerful and has changed so many minds, has done is to undermine those safeguards, telling people, no, it's not okay to commit suicide, you're going to feel better, and we need to power through this together.
You say these deaths have prompted a soul searching in America in a way. As Catholics, how should we address this issue and provide support?
I think we need to be very confident in the fact that suicide is not a good, it's not an answer, it's not a good answer to pain and suffering. When people are suffering, we need to accompany them, we need to be their friends, we need to be there for them and help them through that terrible time. Suicide is never the correct answer.
And of course, it's so important as the Catholic Church. We stand for that and stand for life. Dr. Grazie Christie, policy advisor with the Catholic Association, thanks so much for your input.
Thank you.
And if you suspect someone may be at risk for suicide, or if you ever need to talk to someone about suicidal thoughts, please call the National Suicide Hotline at 1-800-273-TALK. Up next, horse racing history was made over the weekend in New York, and how the Vatican made sure these children are on the right track. History is made in the world of horse racing Saturday night. Justify became the 13th horse in U.S. thoroughbred racing to win the Triple Crown. The 3-year-old captured the Kentucky Derby, Preakness Stakes, and Saturday's Belmont Stakes. Jockey Mike Smith, after the race, thanked, quote, "My Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ," saying Justify was sent from heaven. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby, in for Lauren Ashburn. A New York court sides with the family of Venerable Fulton Sheen in their request to move his body to Peoria, Illinois. The late Archbishop's remains are currently in the crypt of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. The Archdiocese of New York says the Peoria Diocese can pursue Sheen's canonization regardless of whether his body is at rest in Illinois or New York. Peoria hopes New York will drop their legal fight and respect the ruling of the court. The Bishop of Arlington, Virginia is calling out a public school district in his area for proposed changes to its public school curriculum. Bishop Michael Burbidge expresses concerns over proposed changes to the Fairfax County School District's family life education curriculum. Among the changes, using the phrase sex assigned at birth instead of biological sex, and removing clergy from the list of trusted adults with whom children should discuss their concerns regarding sex and sexuality. Joining us now is Father Thomas Ferguson, Vicar General of the Diocese of Arlington. Father Tom, your diocese say these changes, which go before the school board in Fairfax County on June 14th, obscure the truth about human biology, sexuality, and family. How so, and should parents be concerned?
I think that parents should be concerned with some of the changes that the school board is considering, because in many ways these changes truly distort what is real and what is true. As an example, one of the proposed changes is in the use of language to substitute the term sex given at birth for biological sex. What that really distorts is the fact that a person's biological sex is determined not at birth, but at the time of their conception. And it tries to equate the notion of the sex given at birth with our understanding of gender, which, as Pope Francis reminds us, gender and sex are distinct. One is a biological fact, the other is the role that a person assumes in relation to others in society. They might be distinct, but they're not separable. So that when a person is conceived as either male or female, God determines that that person's gender is to be male and female as well. And so we see the use of language as really distorting the truth to try to substitute a term such as sex given at birth for the reality of a person's biological sex, which is really determined at the time of their conception.
But can't parents just opt out? And if that's an option, why are you still warning parents to be so vigilant?
Parents always have the right in the law in Fairfax County to opt out their children from any or all of the lessons in the family life education curriculum. However, parents are really not oftentimes aware of what's being taught. And so one of the first things that we need to do in our churches and our parishes, which we're doing, is really to educate parents to the content of the curriculum. As an example, recently, in the past few years, along with Therese Bernpole from our Office for Marriage, Respect Life, and Family Life in our diocese, and with a coalition of parents organized under the name of parentandchild.org, we've developed each and every year, as the children prepare to go back to school in the fall, a guide that looks at every lesson in the family life curriculum and identifies those things which are relatively innocuous, others that really ought to be approached with caution, and a third category that truly are offensive to our beliefs about human dignity and the truth about human sexuality. And putting this information into the hands of parents, first of all, makes them aware of what is in the curriculum, and then we remind them that they can opt out of any or all of the lessons. And so now they have not only an awareness of their right, but also all the information that they need to make informed choices, to fulfill their responsibilities that they made at the time of their children's baptism, to be for their children the first, and we pray the best, of teachers to their children in the ways of our faith.
And other public school districts across the country teach curriculum that is concerned to Catholic parents, not just in Fairfax County, Virginia. What advice do you have, Father Tom, to offer to Catholic families across the country?
Well, to all Catholic families across the country, I think they need, as I say, to do what we're trying to do in Fairfax County, which is, first of all, be aware of what is in the curriculum, know your right to opt out of those lessons that are offensive to the truth and to our understanding of human dignity and human sexuality, and exercise that right. Also, as Catholics in our Catholic communities throughout the country, in all of our dioceses, our Catholic schools provide a great alternative to what children are potentially being exposed to in our public schools, especially when parents aren't aware of what is in the curriculum.
So many concerns there, and yet so many important messages for parents to keep in mind as well. Father Thomas Ferguson, Vicar General of the Diocese of Arlington in Virginia, thanks so much for talking with us about it.
Thank you very much.
The Catholic Church welcomes 3 new priests to the Diocese of Arlington. Bishop Michael Burbidge ordained Fathers Michael Fulmer, Nicholas Shearer, and Christopher Tipton to the priesthood Saturday. Bishop Burbidge encouraged the men to see Mary as a holy example. Family and friends of the newly ordained priests attended the ordination. A statue of Jesus at a Baptist church in South Carolina now has a new home after it was deemed too Catholic by its congregation. The pastor of Red Bank Baptist Church just outside Columbia says the statue will be taken down and given to another church after its members voted to remove it. He wouldn't say when or where it will go next. Pope Francis clears the way for the beatification of an Argentine bishop who was killed during the country's military dictatorship in 1976. Bishop Enrique Angelelli was officially recognized as a martyr over the weekend. One miracle is still needed in order for him to be considered for sainthood. Pope Francis welcomes more than 500 underprivileged children to the Vatican. The children came from the outskirts of Milan and Rome on a train for a once-in-a-lifetime trip on Saturday. The Holy Father reminded the children not to forget their first teachers in school. He told them those teachers are their roots and will help them bear fruit. Lauren Ashburn is in Mexico this week for a series of reports about the Catholic Church in the country and the issue of immigration. You can see her report starting tomorrow on EWTN News Nightly. Our team in Mexico will also be posting exclusive content on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to follow Lauren at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. And don't forget, of course, about the EWTN News Nightly page on both platforms. And with that, we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We're back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.